So, guys, obviously most of you will be on mute and cameras off already. Just to make you aware that if we can keep it on mute at all times, questions and answers, stick them in the chat room and I'll pick them up and I'll arrange that with Chris later at the end of the presentation. We'll keep all questions and answers to the end, and we'll run through them. Can we keep the cameras off as well, as I said, which it probably is anyway, but also if we can, just to make you aware as well that it is being recorded today, so the presentation and today's event will be available on the Switch website as well. So first I'll just do a small introduction on Switch and who we are and what the group's about. So it's a SCIO registered charitable organisation, multi-partnership forum made up of organisations within the sector, the resource management industry. We aim to provide leadership by working together basically to raise the standards of health and safety, training, learning development and technical competence, to promote the Scottish resource management industry as an attractive career choice as well, to make it a better, safer, more attractive industry to work in. To carry out the work of Switch, we heavily rely on the goodwill of voluntary contributions, like ourselves today, Chris, we're here voluntary. This the same with the meetings and the work that goes in the background. We look for some Switch ambassadors and also to keep things moving. That's on the screen there, just some of the key stakeholders that's involved in Switch in the background to help us keep pushing it along. We work closely, obviously, with Wish, who Chris Jones is he's been involved in that for 25 years there. So, and if anybody that's on the calls know a member, obviously we're keen to attract more membership all the time. That's if you go on the website via Switch, you can just put your details in there and request to become a member, and the membership applications will be sent out direct to you by email. So I'm not going to delay much longer. I'm keen to get moving on Chris's presentation today. That's what we're here for. Some of you in the call may already know Chris, but just as a small introduction, Chris in 24 was awarded an OBE for his services to health and safety. He's a director of risk management at the Corrie Group, one of the kind of UK's biggest waste management companies, having worked in UK and European legislation as well. He's been involved in the sector for more than 30 years. Chris has been involved in the Wish Forum since its beginnings in 2000, and he's been the chair of Wish since 2008 as well. So without delay, we'll just pass over to Chris and get the presentation underway today.
Okay, thanks very much, Gordon. What I would like to do, Mia, if you can just stop your share and I will start sharing my presentation just to make life a little easier at this end.
Yep, if you just click to share, it will just jump over to yours. Yep.
Okay, can I just have a thumbs up that you're seeing? Yep, perfect. Okay. Sorry, just to slightly contradict what Gordon said, if you've got questions, stick them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as we go along. The reason I say do that is because by the time I get to the end of the meeting, you'll have forgotten the question and I'll have forgotten the answer. So actually, if you ask them as we go along, that will be great. I will try and stop at the end of each section to just give you an opportunity to ask questions. This presentation came about because of a request from CIWM to create a presentation for their MVQ assessors across the UK. These are people who come and assess technical competence against waste management MVQs. I ran it a couple of times and it seemed to get quite a lot of attention, and hence the reason why I'm created a bit of an updated version here today. Because of the questions, it's a bit difficult to know exactly how long it will run. Could be an hour, could be a bit longer. If we look like we're going to go over an hour, I will put in a break, and or if you feel like you need a break, then put that in the chat and I'll see whether or not we can't create a bit of a break for you. Wide range of subjects we're going to cover. Let's just make sure that I'm getting on the right thing. Here we go. I'm really looking at the latest sort of things, the issues that are going on, the developments in health and safety. Some of this stuff is not new in that it's problems that we've been having or issues we've been having for some time. So we'll look a bit about the fatal accident histories, the wider accident data and the performance indicators that we're seeing from the industry currently, the ongoing issues of workplace transport, machinery safety, and including the issues that there are currently around the use of bin lifts in automatic mode. Wish has recently released some guidance on large container inspection. I'll touch on that. And one of the things that's we're getting a lot of questions and interest in is dangerous elements in the waste stream. So waste fires caused by lithium batteries and N2O cylinders and things like that, and other elements in the waste stream. Okay, so let's just talk about waste accidents and fatal accidents in waste and recycling. I have to say this because it comes up time and time again. Using fatalities as a way of measuring the performance of the sector is a really bad idea. It jumps about from year to year, and it's very difficult to draw too many conclusions from it. The HSE have a particular set of limitations about the way that they measure things, and it can mean some very perverse outcomes. So things like plumbers' accidents, because they were handling waste at the time, being assigned to the waste industry and therefore becoming part of our statistics, even though really it's not actually a waste-related activity. The other thing is that the HSE statistics don't include RTAs. So where a refuse collection vehicle runs over a member of the public, those are not included because there is simply no way to include them. The police forces around the UK do not record RTAs in a harmonised manner. There's no database that you can look at that will tell you about all of the RTAs in the UK. Each force has a different database and collects the information differently. So consequently, you can't get that information. However, both the sector specialists at HSE and Wish maintain their own lists of industry-related fatalities. And so what I'm going to tell you today is based on our lists, which we do our best to include all of the ones that are relevant. Between 2016 and 2020, the 5-year rolling average, which is probably the best statistic to take for fatals, was 5. So 5 per year, which is still quite high, higher than construction, makes us the most dangerous industry outside of agriculture. But a massive improvement from where we were once upon a time. When I joined the industry, the 5-year rolling average was more like 25. That average dropped to 4.4 the following in 2 years later. So between 2018 and 2022, we had an average of 4.4 per year. Now this is just on the HSE's statistics, but then in 2023 there were 11. And here's my list for 2024. And as you can see, there are 12. That's quite a big jump. And what we did see was a jump in other indicators as well. So the accident stats that some of the larger local authorities produce, that ESA produce, all of which saw rises, something like 15% at ESA, 19% across most of the local authorities. So clearly the industry had a bad period, 2023, 2024. It's looking like 2025 and the 2024-5 figures are falling again. So hopefully it's just a blip. Nevertheless, 23 fatal accidents in 2 years is very much different to the long-term average. And as you can see from the list, the accidents that result in these fatalities are nothing new or novel. These are the classic accident causation factors that we've seen for the last 30 years. For whatever reason, we aren't seeing trends or patterns that we can see. The industry just appears to have taken its eye off of the ball for a couple of years, and clearly we need to refocus, is what I would say. So let's just look at those major accident and fatal causations. Workplace transport still accounts for 30% of all fatalities and major accidents, and is still the biggest causation factor. Entanglement and machinery has increased dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years to become the second highest factor, and is now on a par with workplace transport as a cause of fatalities. 28% of major injuries in the last 5 years, and there have been at least 2 fatalities in the balers and shredders every year for the last 5 years. I have to say, this is the one thing that I do not understand. People climb into balers and shredders while they are live and active to clear blockages on a regular basis. And this is something which is preventable and we should be stopping. I just don't understand why we haven't got a grip of it as an industry. Slips, trips and falls on a level are a big cause of major injuries, but not really of fatalities. We don't see fatalities relating to slips, trips and falls, but they account for about 20% of major injuries. Obviously, much of the industry work takes place outside, so we're exposed to the weather. Some of these are weather related, many not. And one of the factors, if you did drill into this, is the grip factor of the PPE provided. Just because a boot says it's anti-slip doesn't mean it's particularly good actually in wet weather. It means it passes an anti-slip test, which is incredibly specific. If you do other tests, you'll realize that actually many of the safety boots that are provided today do not provide particularly good traction out in real world situations. And falls from height are disproportionately represented. Falls from height tend to have low frequency, but be high severity, and so they account for 10% of major injuries, mostly because pretty much if you fall from height, it ends up as a bad outcome. There was a major study done by CIWM and HSE about 8 years ago, which is actually just now being repeated, and what it looked at was what's the most significant causation factors, and by far the major causation factor is this loss of situational awareness. People get engrossed in what they're doing, they get focused on just the outcome, and they stop becoming aware of the fact that they're standing in a traffic area or maybe climbing into a live baler. So loss of situational awareness is the most significant factor. Explosive events are rare. And in fact, we hadn't seen a fatality associated with an explosive event until 2023, and that's in records that go back more than 20 years. But the exception to that, I'm going to say, is anaerobic digestion, where there have been a few fatalities over the year. But again, those are increasing dramatically. And you may well be aware of the fatalities at Avonmouth, and there was quite a serious case last year where a maturation tank weighing several tons was fired 120 feet into the air, causing 2 serious injuries. So let's just look at workplace transport for a minute. And as I've already said, the key issues they're not new and they haven't changed. What we need to be doing is just following the rules that we've long known. You need to segregate by physical barriers, not painted lines. Minimize the need for people to actually cross traffic routes, exclude pedestrians and vehicles. Every year, pretty much, there's a fatality where people are sorting waste, that's generally at small or medium-sized transfer stations, with a front-loading shovel in close attendance. This is a really bad plan and inevitably results in serious injuries. If you must use heavy machinery to help you sort the waste, then you need to do so in a manner where pedestrians are excluded whilst the machinery is operating. And if you've got to do it, use some controls. The biggest single factor that comes up in court cases is lack of supervision, monitoring and enforcement. Many organisations find themselves in court with an ISO 14001 approved management system, lots of lovely paperwork which has been signed off, but actually what's happening in the workplace does not match this safe system of work. Some people call it practical drift. The difference between work as imagined and work as done is often the thing that lets companies down when they do come to court cases. And so you will find me saying again and again today, this is about supervision, monitoring and enforcement. In the real world, people don't do what they're told all of the time. Even though they may have the training and the knowledge, they will do things that are foreseeable misuses or foreseeable mistakes. And I'm afraid that's what we have to build our systems around. to actually foresee those misuses and mistakes and prevent them. If you want more information about workplace transport, have a look at Waste 09 and Waste 18. Working with collection vehicles continues to be a source of major injury and fatalities, as you know. There's plenty of guidance out on this already. I still see a lack of good quality risk assessments for waste collection. Often they're done in a very light touch fashion, when there actually should be more thought given to the likely places where pedestrians and vulnerable people are likely to be present, and that needs to be flagged to collection crews. It's something which often comes up in court cases, and it's a point that I would ask you all to address. Have a look at Waste 23 and Info 11, both of which have been recently updated. Waste 23 was last year, I think. You will also find examples of how you can undertake route risk assessments on the WISH website under some of the case studies. You need to have training and procedures in place. If your training and procedures say that every reversing maneuver will have a reversing assistant, then make sure it happens, because that's a common failing. I see the system that says that's what happens, but actually when you look into the accident investigation, you find that that was not what was happening. It's often left to drivers to decide whether or not they need a reversing assistant. That's fine, but then the driver needs to have specific training, and the crews and procedures need to understand how that's going to work. If you're going to go down a driver-led method, then you need to actually carry that right through. Let's not forget as well that there were fatalities in 23 and 22 from reversing and parking in the yard. Many of you have to operate from relatively small transport yards and get in large fleets. I know that parking at the end of the day can be a real problem, but it's really important on those occasions, when particularly if you've got crews which are travelling, disembarking from their vehicles and then crossing the transport yard at the same time as other vehicles are parking. It's really important that you have a policy and procedure in place that prevents those two mixing. I'm going to say this probably again and again. All reversing should have a reversing assistant. Okay. And just to be clear, a reversing assistant is not a banksman. I've seen plenty of demented tourists waving their arms at vehicles and not really contributing very much. What actually a reversing assistant is there to do is to make sure that nobody else comes near the reversing vehicle. Modern drivers have plenty of cameras and reversing aids, and if they do impact with something, well, it's bent metal which can be fixed. Actually, if you hit a person, they tend to be soft and squidgy and not so easy to fix. And so really the important role for the reversing assistant is to stay away from the reversing vehicle and to make sure everybody else does. It's an important role, and one which is often, I'm afraid, overlooked. When we come to machinery safety, the issues here aren't new either. I've already touched upon the need for isolation, lockout and tag out. I'm constantly stunned when I go to MRFs to discover that actually in many MRFs there is no way of actually isolating machines for people to enter and work on them. The only way to isolate them is to turn off the main master switches, many of which are not equipped with the kind of lockout facilities so that craftsman's locks and lock keys can be used. I think that's partly because many MRFs have been put together from components. You know, you buy a conveyor here and an optical sorter there and so on, and they're assembled piecemeal. But it's a serious issue. If you're operating a MRF or you're operating a packer, then you must be able to isolate it, and you need to have a proper procedure in place to lock out and tag out. And you, of course, have to make sure that it's actually used. I've already said, on average, well, not on average, every year there are at least 2 fatalities for people clearing blockages or entering into packers. If you do have to, there are occasions for maintenance work. So, for example, with conveyors, occasionally the machinery has to be run whilst the guards are off in order to make maintenance adjustments. If you're going to do that, then there should be a special regime in force, which everybody knows and understands. And it comes back to the point that I've made already. The difference between a lockout and tag out system that works and one where practical drift is allowed to creep in, where it only works, only happens when somebody happens to be watching. And actually, just to get things going on the shift, people frequently open hoppers and or clear blockages without having to go through the lockout and tag out procedure. That must be stopped, because sooner or later it will lead to a serious accident. Have a look at waste 29 and waste 13. Many of the machines that come into the industry aren't specifically for the industry. They're often agricultural equipment, things like balers and so on, and their guarding can be not very good. It's a long-standing joke in the waste industry and actually in the wider safety industry that the CE mark means check everything, and I don't think that's very far off. Make sure that the guarding hierarchy has been applied. Saying, but we've told them not to shove out their hand into it, as I've already indicated, that's the weakest form of control, because you know and I know that people don't always do what they're supposed to do. Safety by distance and position should not be relied upon. I've seen plenty of examples where, when I've been involved in investigating accidents, where there's been an assumption that nobody would ever be able to reach into that conveyor or into that part of machinery because it's 8 feet or 9 feet in the air, or because it's past some sort of rail. Well, the reality is people climb over rails for all sorts of reasons, in simple things like cleaning regimes. And actually people climb on ladders to do electrical work or for whatever other purpose. And so you should not be relying on distance and position. There are plenty of examples in the industry of people becoming seriously injured or even killed where safety by position was relied upon and actually it failed. Have a look at waste 33, the info's 20 through 27, and there are some new ones out just literally this week on crocodile shears and balers. Those also have a look at. I'll mention them a bit later on. Okay, Gary, you've asked a question about, I've said all reversing needs a reversing assistant. How do you do that in single man operations? Clearly you don't, because you need two people. There are two ways in which this can be dealt with. The client can provide a reversing assistant if it's a case of a commercial collection. That the reversing assistant clearly would still need to know their proper roles and everything. Or you should be doing a separate risk assessment, which I know many large organizations do, looking at the particular place where the collection takes place and whether or not it's suitable for single man collections. So let me give you a real life example that I see reasonably often. There is a large commercial 1100 bin stationed next to the main entrance to a local railway station. In order to get to it, the vehicle has to reverse down the main carriageway across the front of the entrance to the railway station, which he inevitably does as I'm going to get the train at 7:30 in the morning, along with hundreds of other commuters. This is clearly not a suitable place for single man collections, notwithstanding that actually that's what takes place in this particular example. Those are the sorts of things that should be eliminated. So have a look at, if you're going to do single man reversing, you need to develop a set of criteria that say, in these circumstances, single man reversing is likely to be suitable and sufficient. And in these circumstances, it definitely won't be. There'll be some in the grey area where I'm afraid you will have to do some sort of separate assessment. Have a look at Info 12, which specifically looks at this, and I think it's Info 13 on commercial waste collections, both of which have examples and templates that you can use to make these kinds of assessments. Okay, I'm going to move on to bin lift. Is any other questions on reversing or the collections or the stuff so far on the accident stats? No? Okay, I'm going to move on then. So what's the problem with bin lifts? Bin lifts operate in an automatic mode of a long history of accidents and incidents, including some fatalities. What happens is that either an operator becomes entangled with the bin, picked up by the bin and dropped in the back. Or there have been instances where members of the public who, for whatever reason, forgot to put their waste out, they'll rush up to the back of the vehicle in an attempt to put it in themselves. The sensors will not know the difference between a bin and a person. All it knows is that something is where it expects the bin to be. It'll then promptly activate and catapult the individual into the back. This is a not particularly great video, but it's one that's in the public domain I can show you. Of this sort of thing happening. This is hand loading a refuse collection vehicle. The two bin lifts on the back of the vehicle are active. They are in automatic mode. From the bin lift's point of view, there's a bin there. Now, this gentleman was very lucky. The compaction cycle was independent of the operating the bin lift. Often the compaction cycle is also in an automatic mode, and his companion was able to assist him to get out quite quickly. Others have not been so fortunate, and all the way back to 2003, there are fatalities associated with people ending up in the hopper. HSE did a search of the RIDDOR database covering the 10-year period from 2012 to 2022. They found 513 incidents that mention people being picked up or engaged with bin lifts, and at least 30 of those they were lifted by the bin lid. Obviously, not all of them mention exactly the circumstances, so it's hard to know. There were 124 major injuries and 389 3 to 7 day absences. It's clearly a serious problem. Just to put this into context, since this issue really came to public attention following the fatality in Coventry in 2023, I've had the joy of having probably every month a new video sent to me of somebody falling in the back. I've had 2 this month already, and it's only the 24th. At a conference with the OEMs back in March 2023, March 2024, the HSE gave a written statement of the problem, which I think is worth just examining. I'm not going to read through all of this. What this essentially says is that we're currently relying on telling people not to get too close to the bin lift and not to stand on the bin lift, and that's the least effective control. We've already talked about the fact that people don't do what they're supposed to do. In a factory environment, as it says, this would not be accepted. If there was a machine in a factory environment that could grab passers-by and throw them into a compaction hopper, it would be guarded with large fences and so on. HSE's view is that it is no longer acceptable to allow this kind of thing on mobile plant. I think the last statement that they made is probably the most powerful. It's not managing the risk, it's relying on luck, and it's not acceptable. HSE have made this point very powerfully to the OEMs, and they are monitoring OEMs' performance in this regard and working with them to try and develop new solutions. So what's the expectation of users? What all you need to be doing? You need to be aware of the emerging EN 1501 Part 5 GB Annex. That's now been published, and it means that all vehicles from January 2027 must comply with the Annex. The Annex requires that there is a safety device fitted which can tell the difference between a person and a bin and meet the safety standard PLD for reliability. At the moment, there is no such device available, but there are a number of promising developments that look like they're going to get there. Unfortunately, because of the way the legislation works, this won't apply to vehicles which are already in use. But what we are doing with the HSE is requiring OEMs to come up with a retrofit package or a mechanism by which existing vehicles can be brought as close to this standard as possible. 1501 Part 5 is currently under review in Europe, and the UK's annex missions are being examined very closely by the European Committee. The drafts of the new standard are already out for comment. If anybody is interested in comment on them, please contact me and I will facilitate you being able to do that. Interestingly, they are following the GB line. no real surprise there, I guess. Talk to your OEM about the availability of upgrades and have a look at the non-OEM upgrades as well. If you are offered upgrades by your OEM, then please have a talk to them and consider carefully what the residual risks are after the upgrade. There was a serious accident last month, which involved somebody ending up with a fractured skull as a result of being picked up by an automatic bin lift, which had been upgraded. It had the latest safety upgrades, and it still happened. So there are residual risks with the current upgrades that are available from Terberg and Zoller. There's a fact sheet for you, Wish Ref 13, which goes through some of the common questions. For example, if I have a mixed fleet, which ones do I need to upgrade first? Well, there's a little flowchart to try and give you a work through on that. It's not an easy answer. There are various factors that will affect which one is better to do first. For example, we've gone through a whole bunch of questions there that we've been working through with all of you over the last year or so. The link is there on the slide. I understand that this presentation, these slides will be made available to you at the end. I'm not going to read all of the slides as a result. Didn't intend to anyway. But hopefully you don't need to therefore take lots of notes. Hopefully you should be able to look this up and use the links as and when you need them. If you do start looking at either non-OEM or OEM additions, then please work through this list of, does it eliminate the risk? Does it just minimize it? What new residual risks does it impose? If it fails, and some of these technologies don't fail to safe by the nature of the way they operate, well, then you need to be aware of that so that checks can be put in place to detect the failure. Do you need to give your workforce extra training or information? And do you know how these things can be bypassed? One of the things that never ceases to amaze me is just how clever the average refuse collector is. I know of a number of things to look for on refuse collection vehicles, things like tiny pieces of broken credit card, which inserted in a particular relay will disable the safety mechanisms on the back and allow the system to operate more quickly than it would otherwise. How they came to find this out, I have no clue. But it's a particular thing that I've seen on a number of occasions, and I know it still happens. Until you've got proper safeguards in place that prevent people being picked up by automatic bin lifts, then the best thing that you can do is to follow Info 26. That's the standard against which you will be judged, and yeah, you can have a look at that. With both Ref 13 and Info 26, if there's anything you don't understand or it doesn't cover, please let us know. We are keeping both these documents under constant review. Literally once a month we meet to see whether or not we need to adjust anything, and we will happily modify or add to them as necessary. And one of the most important things, of course, and I've said it already, is about supervision and monitoring. The difference between the system as described and what actually happens in the workplace is often at the heart of the biggest issues, and certainly have been in some of the practices around the use of automatic bin lifts. If you say that bin lifts should not be used in automatic mode in rural areas where you need to make sure that's happening, and you need to make sure that the crews understand what is rural and what is not, and when automatic is usable and when it is not, and that they follow that. And talk to your provider of upgrade solutions. My understanding is that Terberg currently have bookings running through to the end of 2027. So you could be waiting a couple of years for your upgrades. You're going to need to think about what you're going to be doing in the meantime, and how you're going to deal with that, and how you're going to prioritize those. I think Zoller are doing theirs slightly more quickly at the present, and there are non-OEMs that are able to fit equipment that much sooner, notwithstanding the fact that obviously there are some issues with non-OEM devices. What's going to happen next? Wish and HSE are having regular meetings with the OEMs to get them to look to improve the availability of upgrades, to improve the actual types of upgrades that they're supplying. We're also working with a bunch of new entrants into the market, and there are some very exciting, very interesting looking devices coming forward, both in some are wearables, some use video cameras and AI to address the issues. I think we all think it's very likely that by the deadline of January 2027, there will be safety provisions on the back of dust carts which comply with the UK Annex to 1501 Part 5. The ones that are available currently still do have some residual risks, so you need to be aware of that. And particularly the ones that are relying on AI and cameras, that still has to be proven in the field. Although one organisation in particular has worked with Transport for London and has been using AI in a manner to detect the presence of pedestrians around vehicles for more than 5 years, and has a success rate of more than 99% in detecting individuals. So it's quite a high rate. Okay, that's a scamper through the stuff on automatic bin lifts. Has anybody got any questions about automatic bin lifts? You can either stick your hand up and talk, or you can put something in the chat. See, I've stunned them all into silence. Okay, in which case I shall press on. Wish has recently released new guidance, Wasto 6 and Info 28 on large waste containers. This is roll-on bins and similar, skips, FEL containers and bottle banks. It does not deal with cargo containers like those that are used on rail or ship, but it deals with pretty much everything else. This is because there's been a number of fatalities and serious injuries over the years resulting from defective or damaged bins. When we first drafted this document some 2 odd years ago, when we put together all of the information around what a bin should look like, what sort of the standards should be and so on, working with Chem, we ended up with a document which was more than 300 pages. And we kind of thought that was just a bit indigestible. And so the document's been split into 2. Wasto 6 details the objectives, the standards, the targets, what you should be aiming to achieve. And Info 28 talks more about what to look for, particularly in terms of misuse. It's got lots of pictures in showing damage, which indicates particular misuses or particular patterns of wear that can inform you and assist your inspections. It also includes an awful lot of information about how to address those kinds of issues. So Wasto 6 gives you the what you must do, and Info 28 the ways of doing it and some assistance in doing it. If you haven't seen those already, then please do pick them up. Very useful and interesting, I think. If you've got any feedback, then the usual channels, please. Right, I'm going to move on to dangerous items in the waste stream. Probably one of the things that's going to create the most interest, I suspect. I want to talk a little bit about flammable gas cylinders. These have been a problem for some years. There's no evidence that the presence of LPG or propane and so on cylinders in the waste stream has increased in recent years. It's pretty much stable. They generally appear more in commercial waste than they do in domestic, although small camping gas cylinders and so on have been appearing in domestic waste streams for some years. They do cause issues, but not generally are a cause of significant issue. And as I say, the industry's seen them for probably 30 years. What we are seeing, and this is a still taken from a video that I'm afraid I can't show you, of a collection from a commercial premises of a box of aerosols which were full. Back in 1985, they banned the use of freons and halocarbons as propellants in aerosols. And so aerosols have switched to either butane or propane as propellants. Unfortunately, these are flammable and if the aerosols are full, they can cause serious issues. There have been at least 3 deaths in 5 years as a result of aerosols exploding either in balers or in refuse collection vehicles. Things to watch out for are house clearances where elderly people have died or people are moving, and they will just scoop up all the old aerosols, probably which have anywhere between a quarter and a full, and just scoop them up and stick them in something, and they'll end up in the domestic waste stream. It's a serious issue and not one that's easily gotten around, because we won't be changing propellants anytime soon. It's an issue in collection vehicles, receptionals and CA sites, particularly in shredders, compactors and balers. And some of the new shredder and compactor baler guidance that WISH have issued, so the Info 22 through to 28 and Waste 33 series, talk about the sorts of design criteria that you should be taking into account in allowing for aerosol explosions. It's no good to just have flimsy balers if you're taking in large numbers of aerosols from the domestic premises. I'll come back to the Lola question I can see in the chat at the end, if that's okay, Reza. We've long known and long seen nitrous oxide cylinders. Nitrous oxide is a funny gas. It's something called a non-Boyle's law gas, which means it doesn't really want to liquefy. As a result of which, the pressures inside N2O cylinders are very high, up near 20,000 psi. And even when they're notionally empty, they're still pressurized. This is all to do with the nature of N2O. We've long seen these whippet cylinders in streets and so on. And on and off, we've seen larger cylinders, which have been used for narcotic purposes. They've been found particularly in parks and so on. These are 2.5 or 5 kilo. Generally, they come out of dentistry, and they are capable of causing significant explosions. There has been a small increase in these, but actually their supply is quite limited into the drugs and leisure scene, and so consequently, it's not they are not the biggest issue. These are the biggest issue. 600 gram nitrous oxide. It's provided for catering purposes. Now, the HM government last April banned the supply of N2O, banned the purchase of N2O for leisure purposes, for recreational purposes. You are only supposed to use it for catering purposes. However, and whenever I come to give one of these talks, I check on the website in the morning, and sure enough, I can buy 12 600 gram N2O cylinders from Amazon for about £10, and that'll be delivered. I just have to tick a box that says I'm going to use them for catering purposes. The reality is, of course, that these then are used for narcotic purposes, and there's an awful lot of balloons in one of those cylinders. What does appear to have happened is there was a significant increase in the number of 600 gram cylinders that appeared in the waste stream in the late spring of last year, i.e. immediately after the ban. Well, why is that? I suspect, I don't know, I don't have any science to prove it, but I suspect what was happening was suppliers of these narcotics to users had previously been buying these cylinders and probably been returning them from one of the return schemes. Because there is a risk that if they're using a return scheme, somebody's going to ask how they're using so many cylinders in recycling. Instead of actually returning them, they're now dumping them. And certainly there's been a significant increase in the numbers of N2O cylinders that are finding their way into the waste stream. Corey, my employer, did some work quite recently in London, and on average there are 2 600 gram cylinders in every ton of waste we receive, which is quite scary. Last year's Notting Hill Carnival, so the 2024 Notting Hill Carnival, collected 8,600 gram cylinders on day one and 3.3 tons of cylinders over the 2 days. It's a scary amount of N2O. We're also seeing issues with fire extinguishers being put in the waste stream. Again, not really an increase, but these are the items that can appear in there and will go bang if they're given the opportunity. I was sent a video of a set of our fire extinguishers which had been concealed in some commercial waste going off just a month or so ago. There's been a noticeable increase in, there's some work going on with the Environment Agency and DEFRA to understand where marine flares and other pyrotechnics are coming from. There's been an increase, particularly at CA sites, for the appearance of marine flares and pyrotechnics. I'm not sure we know why. High energy density batteries are an issue. Everybody talks about lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are a problem, but anything which has got a lot of energy density in a small space, and that can be lead acid or other new types of batteries, will explode if they are damaged. And we all know that disposable vapes are now banned. However, that may well prove to be a bit of a forked benefit. There is a study from Imperial College which shows that reusable vapes are 8 times more likely to self-ignite than disposable vapes. The reason for that is that obviously you put your mouth onto a vape, so sputum enters into the object, and liquid and a source of ignition and electrics don't mix. Sooner or later, there is an auto ignition event. So actually switching to reusables may, from our point of view, not benefit us particularly. The other thing that's noticeable is that the manufacturers of vapes are now selling reusable vapes at pretty much the same price point as disposable vapes were. So consequently, actually, they're just going to get thrown away the same as they used to. Been a number of serious fires and serious injuries and even a death associated with lithium batteries concealed in WEEE. There are so many devices nowadays which have a small lithium battery in which consumers may not be aware of and or able to access that end up in the waste stream. I think, well, Wish has approached the lithium battery manufacturers on more than one occasion. They are not particularly interested in dealing with the safety issues around lithium batteries. They comply with the relevant standards, and therefore the idea of putting RFD tags or something like that in so that at least we can find them, they're not interested in, because it adds 0.13 of a penny to every one apparently, and that's too much. I think we are going to have to accept that lithium batteries aren't going to go away, and one of the things we're going to have to do is to better prepare ourselves for ways of for dealing with them. That's our machinery and so on. We're going to have to harden our defences, as it were. You'll find more information on all of this in Waste 3, 26 and Info 8. And if we're talking about fires, then Waste 28, which I think you're probably aware of, which is about waste fires, is a fantastic document. It's been translated now into 4 or 5 different languages and is actually used as the regulatory document in Canada, Australia, and some other countries. More and more people are operating AD plants because of food waste, and we can look forward with simpler recycling to more use of to more small AD plants popping up. If you are going to operate an AD plant, you need to make sure that you actually understand how the darn things work. There have been a series of fatalities and serious injuries over the last 7 years associated with the use of AD by people who really don't understand the technology. They have some goblins come in from Germany or wherever else to install them a nice shiny plant, and they're shown how to operate it. The goblins go back home, and actually they don't really fully understand their technology. The pictures here are of an explosion which has fired a maturation tank 120 feet into the air. That occurred because the people who were operating it did not understand that before a tank is up and running, a biodigester is up and running at its full capacity, it goes through a stage of generating hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very different gas to methane, has a much wider explosive range, and it is much more dangerous in that sense. They got a hydrogen build-up which they were not equipped to deal with, and blew the tank in the air, seriously injuring 2 people. 2 people got life-changing injuries as a result of it. The company were heavily fined. This is a particular example that you can look up in the public domain. There have been a number of others which have stemmed from the same thing. People operating AD plants not really understanding the technology. They've got an instruction book, they've had some people build it for them, but they have not got the expertise and competence in place to do it safely. HSE are doing some work on that, which I'll mention later. Okay, marine flares in Cumbria, increase, yeah, we've seen them in lots of places actually, and not really quite clear why. And I know some port authorities have stopped taking them. You wouldn't have thought there was that many around, but there you go. Just to come back to this question about Lola equipment. Lola is currently being reviewed. Wish has been consulted on that review, and we've asked HSE to either include in Lola, the Lola guidance, or put on the website, which they have currently, an explanation of exactly when a piece of equipment needs to be inspected under Lola. Just as an example, a skip normally doesn't need to be inspected under Lola. However, if it is being used on a construction site, so if they're going to fill it with concrete and pick it up with a crane, it becomes lifting equipment, and then it does need to be inspected under Lola. So that will be explained. However, all large containers should have an inspection under Pure, and that point will be made in the forthcoming revision to Lola much more clearly, so that people can understand. I hope that answers your question, Reza. If it doesn't, then talk to me at the end. Okay, I've been going for just on an hour. I have a reasonable amount still to do. Everyone, can I have a quick show of hands? Do people want to take a 5-minute break, or do you want to press on? So stick your hand up if you want to take a 5-minute break. Okay, so there's a few of you. Let's just... Good to press on. Okay, split down the middle. There are a few people who want to take a break and a few want to press on. I'm going to press on, I think, because it didn't look like there was enough to make it worth. I will try and inject a break, though. Is there guidance on best methods of fire detection for bulking facilities? Yes, there is. Look in Waste 28. Okay, I'm going to press on then, and I'm going to talk a bit about fires in RCVs. This is a subject which Wish has been working with the National Fire Chiefs Council on. We have been asked by the National Fire Chiefs Council and by DEFRA to produce some guidance on how to deal with a fire in an RCV. We've looked at this. It's a question that Wish has been asked many times over the last 15 or so years, and we've looked at it many times. It is not a simple solution. What I want to just go through is why it's not a simple solution. It's because of the number of variables involved. Now, some of this you're all going to say, well, I know that, but let me work through it and set the scene before I answer directly the question of what do I do with an RCV on fire. We need to think about the different types of vehicles there are. Okay, there are different powertrains and different fuels. You can have diesel, they're increasingly seeing CNG and LNG vehicles. These are vehicles which are powered from gas generated from food waste or green waste that they collect. Very circular things, done a lot in Scandinavia and so on. As a general rule, the vehicles, and you can see some pictures on the screen, are fitted with a specific tank to cope with the CNG, a specially built and installed tank. I hope you can see my cursor. You can see normally it's just behind the cab, and you can see here and here and here the tanks that contain the LNG. Okay, and you can see on that graphic there what I'm talking about. But that's not the only way in which CNG and LNG can be carried in a vehicle. And if you can see this vehicle on the bottom left, there is a pod on the back at the top where conventional LPG or CNG cylinders are fitted that power the vehicle. I'll show you something similar for hydrogen in a minute. So there are two different vehicle types, and obviously a fire in these vehicles, in the compartment, the back compartment of these vehicles, we need to think carefully about where the fuel is stored. lots more electric vehicles appearing. Typically, the electric vehicles, the fuel is stored in a compartment underneath the vehicle or underneath the cab. You can see here. And we are starting to see hydrogen vehicles. Generally, they have a tank behind the cab, but we are also seeing, and this is one from Glasgow, so it's a perhaps app that I'm talking to switch. You can see here the hydrogen cylinders on this vehicle are stored on the roof in pretty much the same way as LNG and CNG are stored in some of those vehicles. And there are some operating, I believe, in South Cams that are on the same principle. And you can see the schematic here. Basically, cylinders of hydrogen are stored in a roof-mounted tank, which is then fed into a fuel cell. We also need to think about the machinery that's fitted to the vehicle. There's an awful lot of hydraulics on a vehicle. To open tail ends, to operate compactors, and so on. Some vehicles are purely electric. Most have a hydraulic system of some kind filled with hydraulic fluid, which I'll come back to in a minute. You get some split hydraulic electric, and they're not cheap. Once upon a time, these are kind of the typical prices. Some of you may know more than me. Once upon a time, an open back dust cart was under 100 grand. Now some of the more expensive ones are up near $500,000, and the lead times for them are very long. I've heard of lead times anything up to 20 months, quite recently. As a result of which, naturally, operators want to protect their RCVs, and there has been a move towards ejecting loads that are on fire at the earliest possible opportunity. That's not always the right answer, and I'll come to why. I want to show you an incident that occurred on the 12th of December last year in Illinois to illustrate some of the problems that we face with dealing with a fire in an RCV and what the right solution is. In this particular vehicle, as you can see in this picture, CNG cylinders that powered the vehicle were encased in the box at the roof, and we've seen some UK vehicles that are similar. When there was a fire in the back of the load, that happened. This video will show you in slightly more graphic detail. Clearly, dealing with a fire in a vehicle which has got CNG cylinders on the roof, if you've got a fire in the hopper there, you need to take very different measures. And in truth, if you're going to operate vehicles which have CNG cylinders on the roof, those cylinders should have bursting discs and should have fire protection on them to prevent that kind of event. Oh, sorry. How often are we seeing vehicles on fire? There's no historic data. Anecdotally, people say 2 or 3 per year in major companies. I've talked in recent months to some of the bigger organisations in the UK. Again, we don't have absolute data, but pretty much it's 1 per day across in the major organisations. I reckon currently I'd estimate that there are 4 or 5 per day somewhere in the UK, and that's a lot higher than they used to be. Why? Lithium batteries and other things as well. What are the causes of these fires? We're seeing fires from the vehicles themselves, electric-driven vehicles, electric-powered vehicles in particular. There is a vulnerability there. Battery cells can fail, and when they do, there will be a major fire. But we've long seen fires associated with fuel leaks and things like that as well. So it's not always the load that causes the problem. It can be lithium batteries. There's plenty of examples of that where it's been proven that lithium battery was a source of the fire. We still see a spike in RCV fires and fires at waste facilities in spring when we first get the nice weather and everybody gets the barbecue out for the first time. You get particularly the tray disposable barbecues. At the end of the day, people just fold the tray up and put it in, even though the coals are still alight. They can maintain their temperature for quite some time and cause a fire a long time later. And aerosols and cylinders that I've already talked about. So from the flammable components of aerosols. What do we do with an RCV fire? So I said that Wish has talked about this for some time and looked at it, and we've developed a standard answer when people send that question into the Wish email address. That's it. It's lots of very fine print. The flowchart that we had for this was huge, and that's not really givable to a driver who's not going to work through all of these processes in the 10 seconds after he discovers that his load is on fire. I'm going to leave that there, and you will be able to look at it on the slides later. So I'm not going to go through this in any great detail. 2 or 3 points I will make. There are plenty of examples where ejecting the load turned out to be the wrong thing to do. The sudden exposure to oxygen can cause the fire to suddenly accelerate. And in some cases, it then enveloped the vehicle, which could not get away quickly enough and was lost as a result. It can also result in smoulders turning into fires, which can then heat components in the waste, like cylinders and aerosols, which can explode. Actually, it would be better if it was left in those cases to smoulder in the back. Nevertheless, when you've got your expensive dust cart with a smouldering fire in the back, you want to protect the vehicle, and you need to think about that. There is one particular issue that you need to think about that I think can be addressed. Now, I talked about hydraulics being an issue, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second and show you a different video. I hope most of you can see this. The video is in a funny format, and some people may have trouble depending on their particular connection. So this video, which I hope you can all see, Mia or somebody pop on and just give me a thumbs up to show that we can see it, please. Yeah, okay, fantastic. This is an aluminium plant in Spain, and they press sheets of aluminium into different shapes. This is a piece of hydraulic machinery that uses hydraulic fluid, which is just like the hydraulic fluid that you're operating in your RCVs. I'd like you to keep your eye on this piece here. This hydraulic hose will burst. Now, hydraulic fluid under pressure can spray out and become quite dangerous. This isn't an RCV, but this is exactly what has happened in a number of RCV cases. I just happen to have a good video of this one. So when released under these, where the hydraulic lines have burst as a result of the heat in the hopper and have sprayed jets of flame, igniting surrounding buildings, vehicles, and causing serious issues for firefighters. One of the issues around my RCV's on fire, what do I do about it? Okay, do you have the cylinders on top? Are your hydraulic fluids FRFs or not? Because actually, if they're FRFs, you're more likely to be able to continue to use the machine to discharge the load. So actually, that's a relevant factor for thinking about, do I discharge it now or do I wait? And you are unlikely to have one of these kinds of vapor explosions and or have issues around that. And so those are the sorts of things that the fire brigade are going to want to know before they tackle our RCV on fire. So those are the things that you need to think about. You need to think about your ability to eject the load. If you do have a fire on board, can you eject the load? If the fire is in your electrical system and it's an electrically operated RCV, probably not. What are you going to do if there are gas cylinders or lithium batteries or aerosols in the load? This comes back to where you're going to discharge it. There was an incident in 2023, early 2023, where a load was discharged inside which was found an acetylene cylinder. As a result of the discovery of the acetylene cylinder, the load was left in the road on a major highway for 24 hours to cool, causing chaos in the local area. Think about where you're going to discharge them and what are you going to do when you do discharge them, and about clearing up. Sorry, I should have taken you to that picture on the bottom right hand side. This is actually from the UK. It's from Cambridgeshire, and they have had a number of instances where they have been unable to fight the fire in the RCV because they are unable to discharge the load, and so they have taken what I would regard as extreme measures to cut big holes in it, rather than try and transport a burning vehicle away from a major highway. And there's obviously the clear up issue. You may well need to have some sort of call off or some sort of information and access to front loading shovels and so on that can be taken to a place as part of your emergency procedures in order to clear up. Okay, that's what I can say about RCV fires. We will publish a document, a draft for consultation this year. We're working on it now. But if you're looking for an answer of my RCV's on fire, what do I do? I can't give you one. You're going to need to work that out for yourselves based on these various factors. One other piece of information I'll give you is that there is currently some discussion in the fire and rescue services. Some fire and rescue services, Manchester particularly, I think Cambridge, a couple of others, London, have looked at convoy. So in other words, if a vehicle is on fire, instead of discharging it on the road, they will convoy it to the nearest facility with a fire bay, a drench facility capable of dealing with the vehicle and its load. Manchester have a policy of definitely doing it. London have a policy of never doing it, and there are policies in between depending on exactly where you are operating. I think one of the things that we will try to develop with the NFCC is some sort of decision-making protocol about when it's a good idea to convoy and when it's not, when it's a good idea to instruct people to eject the load and when it's not. But it's not a simple problem, and giving a broad instruction to all of your crews to do X is probably not the right answer. So this is actually quite a difficult challenge for us to come up with some guidance on, purely because of all the variable factors that I've talked about with placement of fuel tanks, hydraulic liquids, and so on. And ESA are looking at it too. Yes, thank you, Reg. Okay, so is there any questions on RCV fires? I hope, I'd love to have given you an answer, but I can't. No. Raza, your question, thinking more of the changes lifting equipment for RCV we talked about earlier. Yes, there will be. So there's already information in Ref 13 about Lola inspections for vehicles. I think we will probably beef that up once the Lola revision's been through. Right, nearly at the end. I'm just going to go through the wish documents very quickly. so that you can understand what WISH documents are, because it's a question that WISH gets asked quite frequently. Their legal standing, this could be important to you, and where we are with various documents presently. I'll do my best to give you an update, and then I think we're done. So we have documents which are in the format waste 03, 050, whatever, a waste XX. These are formal guidance documents. They will focus on the standard to be met. They have a legal standing in that they are equivalent to a HSE approved code of practice. What that means is that they're fully endorsed and approved by HSE, DEFRA and HMG. And the fancy legal term is onus probandi. The burden of proof. If you've got this quaint idea that you're innocent until proven guilty, please lose it now. In this particular case, and in health and safety law generally, all the HSE has to do is prove that somebody was hurt and prove that there is a standard. The burden of proof is then on the duty holder, i.e. probably you, to show that what you did complied with that standard. And that's the case here with waste documents. Okay, so in court, and I've done 50 odd cases over the years, all that HSE will do is say, okay, here is waste 03. This person was injured in an accident which is covered by waste 03. It's for you to show that what you did was as good as what waste 03 requires, or whichever waste document it is. We also produce info sheets. So you have infos 10, 12, 13, and so on. These have a slightly different legal standing. They provide information about the how you can achieve the relevant standard, not what the standard is. They are equivalent in law to HSE's guidance or HMG's guidance. WISH is required to consult with HSE and others, but we do not have to follow what they say, and they do not have to endorse or otherwise approve of such documents. They have a slightly different legal standing. An info document can be produced in court. However, it would be then for the HSE to show that you did not do what you did was not as good as the standard described in the info sheet. So info documents have a slightly different standing to waste documents. Waste documents are the higher in legal terms. And finally, we have lots of ref documents. These are templates and forms and all sorts of other pieces of information which we mean for you to use freely. They're often contributed free by our commercial organizations. For example, there are whole training videos on there and or presentations with the ability to remove the creating organizations, advertising and so on. So we make that stuff freely available. It can be downloaded from our website. That can't be produced in court. It doesn't have any legal standing. It is just stuff that we make available to you for your use. Right, where are we? I think there are north of 80 WISH documents now, and I'm certainly not going to go through all of them. I'll focus on the ones that I've highlighted in yellow in the coming slides. So waste 03, which is about cylinders in the waste and orphan cylinders, is currently under review. It will probably be out in the autumn with some more information, particularly on how to deal with N2O, which is a bit of a problem at the moment. Waste 06, which is the large container management, that's actually out now and been published. It was published about a month ago and it's on the waste website. Similarly, a new and improved and revised waste 09 with an information sheet that goes with it has also been published. So this table is slightly out of date. We're still discussing with BMRA about recovery of petrol from vehicles. The offensive hygiene waste, so that's the review of the waste industry guidance that marries up to the yellow book if you do clinical waste. That should be out in for consultation in October. There's a group under the Healthier Group looking at it. Waste 25 is with an ESA working group, I believe, which is the people in bins guidance. There is an update on the hazardous substances in waste and recycling taking place. Got a bit more to say about that in my last couple of slides. The procurement guidance, which first appeared in 2012 and maybe of interest to some of you if you're in local authorities, this talks about how to procure safe services and so on, safety in procurement. That's probably won't get published now until 2026, just because we don't have the available resource to do everything. Supervisor competence is with the competence working group, and we are hoping that they will get something out early next year. And there's a mental health document which we're drafting with ESA. That probably won't be until next year either. Info 4 on safety aids is with an ESA working group. I'd hope that we will be able to push that off the end next year. Info 10, I've got already a draft to add issues around mini freighters. So these are sometimes called leaf presses or litter presses. There are quite a number of issues with those, with the controls for the back end. So the controls for the operation of the bin lifts and so on, far too close to where the actual bin lifts are. And there have been accidents and serious injuries as a result. So that needs to be updated. Info 12 is being updated for vehicle manoeuvring, not only to cover reversing, which is what it does currently. There have been some serious injuries with people working alongside manoeuvring vehicles. So we're just going to expand that. And most of those ones, which are the machinery safety ones, have all been published in the last couple of weeks. I think fragmentizers and metal shredders is still to be published. That will be published next month. But certainly the others, so the cable strippers, metals balers and crocodile shears, have all been published literally in the last week or so. And I've already talked about the mini freighters to be added. In Ref 12 about split, some organisations split black bags, HWRCs and CA sites. HSE produced a note on this probably 10 years ago, which we've updated and turned it into a reference document, which is now on the website. Ref 13, you already know, is published, and we're working on the FAQs, which will include the RCV fires. Okay, I'll leave you with a few I guess things that are coming in the future. POPs and PFAS have been the subject of major studies by HSE and to a lesser extent the EA. WISH has been working with those. I have to say, although we haven't produced guidance yet, the studies have concluded, and I don't think there's going to be any nasty surprises for the industry. The exposure levels that were detected were not exciting, and there are all sorts of issues around the actual detection and measurement methodologies, and it's very difficult to show a cause and effect relationship relating to health. So consequently, I don't think that's going to cause us much of a headache, but we will be publishing some guidance about POPs and PFAS in probably either later 2025 or early 2026. This is slightly more concerning. WISH were asked and the Open University were asked to look at the incidence of antibiotic resistance in the microbes that are associated with bioaerosols. This comes about because in the last 5 years, there's been a massive increase in antibiotic resistant diseases being seen in hospitals. So extrinsic alveolitis, which is also known as farmer's lung cases, whereas they were seeing maybe one case a year, which was resistant to antibiotics 10 years ago. Last year there were 50, and in previous years the number's been rising. What's concerning here is that the study that was undertaken last year has shown that there are antibacteria resistant organisms and organism fragments in every single test that was taken in waste transfer stations, at waste collection activities and so on. So the bioaerosols associated with those activities all contained antibiotic resistant organisms. Doesn't mean that's where they originated. It may well be coming in through the food chain or something, but it's something of concern, and we're going to have to look very carefully with occupational hygienists about what advice and guidance we give about exposures to bioaerosols, waste management activities. through the work on automatic bin lifts or bin lifts operating in automatic mode, and because of some work that's being done at workplaces, CCTV combined with AI is now producing some very interesting solutions. And there are a couple of organizations now who actually have in place CCTV, which is able to predict unsafe behavior based on patterns of behavior by using an AI. It sounds a bit like the film Minority Report, where they can predict somebody going to be committing a murder, and actually it's scarily accurate. What the AI is able to do is to identify individuals from CCTV images, look at their patterns of behavior, and it has been trained to identify patterns of behavior that are likely to lead to an unsafe act. It can then raise an alarm directly with a nearby smartphone equipped supervisor who can go and tap somebody on the shoulder and go, just concentrate a bit, you're about to make a mistake. Really quite scary stuff, but really interesting, and would be a great innovation in dealing with some of the human behavior issues that the industry faces. WISH has just started with UCLAN, that's University of Central Lancashire, and WISH Phase 4 fires research. And what we're looking at there is, how does waste auto-ignite? So how deep-seated bunker fires, how do they auto-ignite? What causes them to happen? And can we detect them early? The way this is being done is to use ground-penetrating radar. So it's a sensor which can look into a bunker, and micro-density changes associated with pre-ignition can be detected and potentially could sound an alarm to allow an operator to know that there's something going on in his waste piles that he needs to pay attention to. A series of experiments started at UCLAN about a week or so ago, and we're hoping that probably next year we'll be able to publish something, and it may well be an interesting solution to some of those issues. And not surprisingly, I think we can look forward to a lot more interest in the safety of collection vehicle design. The issues of the Illinois explosion, fires in vehicles, automatic operating bin lifts and so on have caused both the SEN committee, which is in charge of EN 1501, the standard for vehicles, to set up a review. And you're already aware that there are committees under BSI and the Office for Public Safety and Standards of HSE, which are all looking at safety of collection vehicles. I think you can look forward to some more detailed and probably much better safety standards for collection vehicles going forward. Of course, this is not going to address the fact that we all operate old fleets that somehow have got to be upgraded over time. Right. Questions. We've got to the end, and that was an hour and a half. So thank you, and my apologies to those who I promised to break and didn't get it, but the consensus seemed to be to move on. So if anybody wants to unveil themselves or put their hand up and ask questions, please do. I will stop sharing. Questions in the chat?
Yes, thanks very much for that. I think, can you hear me okay, Chris?
Yes, I can.
I think there's one question in there still to be addressed, run about the best methods for, is there any guidance available in best methods of fire detection for bulking facilities?
Yeah, it's in White 28.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a technical annex to Waste 28, which is probably still the longest piece of guidance that we produce at several hundred pages, which discusses the merits and demerits of various fire detection methods. There's no simple answer. It's not like saying, oh yeah, let's all put in thermal cameras. And in many cases, you have to use what's called a double knock solution. So a solution that relies on detection of fire in two different methods. The reason for that is our facilities are inevitably dusty. And if you use one method of detection, then they tend to be vulnerable to false positives. Beam detectors particularly are very unreliable. But even thermal imaging, so thermal cameras can be set off by hot vehicle exhausts and that kind of thing. If you use a double knock system, one which looks for flame as well as thermal, and possibly a beam system as well, you're more likely. But all of that's discussed in Wish Waste 28, which you'll find on the website.
Yeah, I had a bit of experience of that in the past, Chris, and I think too many variables, I think, is probably the answer again there, where depending on the materials, depending on the building type, depending on the surrounding areas, certainly deters where you sway in technology. Chris, that presentation, thanks for that. That presentation contained a lot of information. I think, frustratingly for me, it's still very much run about traffic management plans, pedestrian segregation, garden, automated bin lifts and fires, which is pretty much been a challenge for the industry for a fairly long time now, I would say, having been in it 20 years myself. We kind of do a wee bit of work lately, Chris, and brought it back to people, systems and equipment.
Yep.
If the equipment's properly procured and the equipment's designed properly through the WME, and it's great to see you guys at Wish taking that challenge to the designer and taking it to the procurement to get it right in the first place. If the systems are then there to use that, and then there's the people. We've done a wee bit of work recently, Chris, and I just interesting to hear your thoughts on this, where human behaviour, if you like, is always going to be a challenge. We are now visiting customer premises where waste segregation has never been a challenge to them, and all of a sudden staff kind of don't really see it as their problem, don't really see it as their challenge. We're starting to see that in the health and safety side of things. Human behaviour since, I'm going to say, furlough, no COVID, appears to have changed, one towards work, one towards attitudes to health and safety, almost like no my issue sort of thing. Is that something that you guys are seeing down south as well, where the attitude towards it's changed?
Do you know, at one point in time, they were the members of the public were out bashing pots and pans and clapping us, and then not long post COVID, we saw a 40+% increase in acts of violence against refuse collection staff, and particularly against recycling staff, actually, who declined for whatever reason to pick up contaminated waste. And that has continued. It's not exclusive to the waste sector. Actually, many retail organisations have seen something similar. I think something happened to the national psyche over COVID that have made people less tolerant, perhaps, and certainly we've seen that in over the whole of the UK. I know there are some people on this call who operate in large waste companies across the whole of the UK, and they've reported this on a regular basis. The industry has for a very long time had a problem. People see the waste industry as the problem, not the solution. Actually, the public make the waste. We don't. We're the ones who are trying to solve the problem, but they don't seem to get that. And that, I think, is it's affecting the ability to recruit the brightest and the best into the industry. You know, I do a lot of work with sixth forms and kids of that sort of age, and when you say to them, if you thought about a job in the waste industry, they look at you like you're a three-headed frog. But the reality, and yet they're probably the most environmentally aware, conscious, and active group of all. We've somehow got to get over that problem. So, and actually trying to get to the public to make them more conscious of the impacts of their decisions, particularly putting hazardous substances in the waste stream. It's an issue. I had the pleasure to meet the Prince of Wales back in October at my investiture, and this was the subject of the discussion I had with him. And I know that he is very keen to educate people about the benefit, about why we have waste collection, and actually how to make it safer for all of us.
Yeah. But one of the recent events we've experienced is we service the waste management at two airports local to us, and I was quite taken aback actually when we've had to provide facilities for camping gas cylinders, because people continue to try and enter a plane to go on a camping trip, but they've got gas cylinders in their bags. And I found that a wee bit, I was quite taken aback, to be honest, because I just couldn't believe that would happen. But there you go, so human behaviours. The other point I've got, Chris, is, and I know just talking to colleagues and through our work at Switch and discussions, I'm a wee bit alarmed, I suppose. I see a change in procurement. So via PCS and PCST, which is the platforms that we would work on up here in Scotland, I find the emphasis and the details required under health and safety to go and win an award seem to be reducing slightly and being almost replaced by a bigger section on sustainability and community benefits. That alarms me a small bit, to be honest, that's happening. But I just wonder, do you guys see that down south of the border as well?
On the wish waste, on the wish work list, you saw procurement waste 33. Was 33? Yeah, I think it's 33. We reduced procurement guidance in 2012 because there was a serious issue with the way that local authorities in particular, but actually it applies to all organisations. Organisations were seeking to abdicate safety. They weren't really interested when they were procuring the services whether they were safe or not. That's the problem for the person operating it, not my problem. And that's not the way the HSE sees it, and certainly not the way I see it. Things improved after 2012. Judith Hackett and others, so she was at the time the chair of HSE, did a roadshow. There were 22 or 23 meetings held with all of the heads of procurement across the UK. And it was explained to them that this had to stop. And actually, we saw local authority contracts that were coming out and some of the larger organisation contracts that were coming out, including much stronger safety elements and requiring people to meet sensible safety standards as part of their procurement. That has definitely diminished since probably 2020. As a result of which, the need to refresh and republish the procurement guidance was actually raised with us by DEFRA. Hence the reason why we're now coming out to it. So you're not alone in thinking this, and actually there are some people in the government or in the civil service at least, who are realising that there's some backsliding because of the cost of living, because of the economic issues. All of this has become more important, and I'm afraid safety has been given a bit of a back seat, and some balance needs to be restored, is what I would say. Hence the reason why we're going to come back out with the procurement guidance.
Yeah, quite worrying. So is anybody else got any other questions? I don't see anything coming through in the chat.
They're all probably desperate either to go to the loo or to have a cup of tea. It's a very long session. What I would say to you is the organisers have my email address. And I've put already the Wish website in the chat. If you go to the Wish website, there's a info@wish request box that you can send in a question or whatever. If you've got a question, then let me know. Yes, there is. Right, that question on 1501. 1501 Part 5 only applies to vehicles which have to comply with 1501. And 1501 only applies to large refuse collection vehicles. So there is no standard for mini freighters. That's a problem which Office for Public Safety and Standards are currently looking at. And we think probably we'll produce a UK standard, which will then send over to the SEN committee for consideration. But unfortunately, as those of you who've been involved with such things know, getting national and international standards changed takes time. It could be 5 years before that gets resolved, but that won't stop us doing it as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Alistair, you've got
Alistair Milton's hand up there as well.
Can you hear me okay, Gordon?
Yep.
Yeah.
Apologies, Chris and Gordon. I've only just managed to get on the call. It was just to highlight, Gordon, that this has obviously been recorded, so that will go up in the Switch website. So if there's people on the call that want to share it with their colleagues and whatever, then you know that will be shared in the Switch website. And we try, on Switch's behalf, we try as much as possible. Whatever Wish is putting out, we try and duplicate and share it. So you know, but we try and as much as possible point to the Wish website, so we're not confusing people. We did have a wee issue. There's been a few updates come out recently where the Wish website wasn't quite up to date. We had a wee bit of confusion that I did actually take a post down because of that. So, but we try and, you know, point towards Wish rather than, you know, Switch duplicating stuff.
Yeah, one thing I would say to all of you is, if you want to be involved, you know, if you've got an interest in something or are concerned about something, then come and be involved. Do something about it. We're always looking for people to assist us in our working groups. All of our drafts and consultations are open. We have a completely open policy. We don't draft things in secret. If you've got an interest in a particular area, then send a note into the Wish website and we'll make sure that you're copied into the correspondence that's going on in that particular area with that particular working group. If you're willing and able to help us draft things, so much the better. Many people seem to have this idea that law gets handed down on tablets of stone from some high place or the other. The reality is that Wish works by talking to all of you and writing the guidance, which has legal standing, based on the information and the experience that you give us. So if you want things changed or put into law, then you have the means for doing that. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, Doe. I think that's us run through the questions that were there as well. If there's anything else, again, we can follow that up. Chris has put some details up there as well. There's also myself and Alistair on the call. We've got the details there on the website for Switch for that. So I'd just like to take this chance to thank Mia this morning for her assistance. Thank everybody for their time and attendance, and yourself, Chris, for that presentation this morning. It's certainly pressing issues, and every one of those topics is probably in every one of our agendas to try and better or resolve as we go every day. So thanks again for your time.
You're very welcome.
Okay, Doe.